welcome to Talk Treatises.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Today we are opening the cabinet. And I don't mean a political cabinet, and I certainly don't mean the kitchen cabinet where you keep your spices.
Yeah.
We are stepping into the dusty, highly polished, meticulously organized world of the 19th century naturalist's cabinet.
Right.
We are looking at a text from 1838. This is Thomas Wyatt's masterwork, A Manual of Conchology.
Which, on the surface just sounds like a book about seashells.
Exactly. And I think if you were just walking past this in a used bookstore or you saw it listed in a digital archive somewhere, you'd assume it's just a field guide.
Yeah, picture book.
Right. You'd think, okay, here are some nice lithographs of clams, here are some snails, moving on. But the mission of this deep dive is to prove that this book is not merely a catalog of sea life.
Not at all.
It is a treatise on order. It's a treatise on logic. And honestly, it feels like a desperate attempt by the 19th century mind to impose structure upon the absolute chaos of nature.
It is a seminal text on classification. And when you look at it through that specific lens, it stops being about mollusks. It starts being about how we know what we know. It is an epistemology, really, disguised as a beachcomber's guide.
So let's set the scene for everyone. The year is 1838.
Queen Victoria has just taken the throne.
Yes. The world is rapidly becoming industrialized. Steam engines are hissing, factories are churning. And in the drawing rooms of the educated elite, everyone is suddenly obsessed with shells.
It's the era of the cabinet. And this is crucial for you to understand before we even crack the book open. In 1838, a finished education, meaning being a properly civilized human being, it required you to have a grasp of natural history.
You had to prove it.
Exactly. And the way you demonstrated that grasp was by possessing a physical cabinet. You'd have these beautiful mahogany drawers filled with minerals, fossils, and most importantly, shells.
Wyatt actually writes about this in the introduction. He says that conchology has obtained a prominent situation in the cabinet. It was a massive status symbol.
It really was.
It was the 19th century equivalent of, having a pristine, color-coordinated bookshelf background on a video call. It signaled to everyone that you were a person of intellectual substance.
It does signal that.
Yeah.
But it's also a deeply intellectual exercise. You have to remember the timeline here. This is pre-Darwin.
Right. Darwin's On the Origin of Species doesn't drop until, 1859?
1859, yes. So 20 years later, when Wyatt looks at a shell, he isn't seeing an evolutionary branch. He isn't seeing a transitional form slowly adapting to an environment. He is seeing a fixed, static object. A medal of creation.
A medal of creation. I love that phrasing.
It's beautiful. He is seeing a piece of a divine puzzle that has been scattered across the ocean floor. And his job, and the student's job, is to pick it up and put it back in the exact right box. It relies entirely on morphology. The shape and the form are the ultimate truth.
That's the intellectual problem we're tackling today. How do you make sense of the infinite variety of what Wyatt calls testaceous coverings? Because you have things that look like worms, things that look like literal rocks, and then things that look like delicate porcelain vases.
They're chaotic.
It is. Wyatt's goal was to synthesize the really complex systems of his day, specifically the Lamarckian system, and the improvements made by de Blainville into a logical, coherent framework for the student of the cabinet.
And the thesis here, if we had to boil it down to a single sentence, is this. Wyatt argues that through the rigorous application of the Lamarckian system, specifically dividing nature into 4 distinct classes, we can decode the history of the Earth itself.
These aren't just pretty objects.
No, they are geological documents.
Okay, let's unpack the architecture of this system, because Wyatt doesn't just throw a bunch of shells at you. He builds a strict hierarchy, and he starts with a very specific definition. He calls it conchology, or testacology.
Testacology is the study of the testa, which means the hard covering. And this is a really important distinction he makes.
Why is that?
Well, Wyatt is very clear that he is treating the testaceous covering, not necessarily the animal inside, in all its biological squishy detail. He's looking at the architecture of the house, not the lifestyle of the tenant.
Why that separation, though? I mean, today, biology is all about the organism, the DNA, the soft tissue, the metabolism.
Because the tenant is temporary. The tenant dies. The soft body rots and dissolves back into the ocean almost immediately. But the house, the shell remains. Wyatt is obsessed with permanence.
That makes sense.
He makes a visual argument right off the bat. He says only the Department of Flora, flowers and plants, can vie with shells in symmetry of form and rich coloring. But flowers wilt, They decay. Shells are forever.
And that permanence leads us directly to the geological connection. This is where it gets really fascinating for me. He quotes Bergman, who calls fossil shells metals of creation.
Think about what a medal actually is. It's a commemorative object. It's struck out of metal to mark an event in history, a victory, a coronation, a peace treaty.
A physical record.
Exactly. Wyatt is arguing that if you find a specific shell and specific layer of rock, a stratum, you know exactly where you are in the history of the Earth. The logic is purely deductive.
He says the geologist draws advantage from studying these Mallesque animals to determine the superposition of different strata. So the shell is quite literally a timestamp.
Precisely. And he goes even further than that. He says the accumulation of these animals, generation after generation, just dying in the depths of the sea, is one of the evident causes of the growth and increase of islands and continents.
That is a staggering thought for 1838. We tend to think of continents as these massive geological tectonic plates crashing together, but he's saying no, a lot of the solid land you're standing on is just billions of dead shell creatures piled up over time.
It's biological terraforming, life-creating land. So the stakes of understanding conchology are incredibly high here. You aren't just sorting pretty things into trays, you are learning how the Earth itself was built.
You are reading the autobiography of the planet, written in calcium carbonate. So how does he organize this planetary autobiography? He divides the world of shells into 4 classes. It's a logical quadrivium. And I really want to walk through these one by one because they seem to progress from simple to complex, or maybe from chaos to strict order.
It is definitely a progression. You can look at it as a ladder of complexity and, in a way, agency.
The first rung of that ladder is class 1, the Analids.
The worms. Or, more strictly speaking, the tube dwellers.
The logic of the tube.
Yes. This is the absolute most basic form of protection. Imagine you are a soft, vulnerable, blind creature in a hostile ocean. What do?
You build a pipe.
You build a pipe. You encase yourself. It's the primal architecture of survival. Just put a wall between you and the water.
And some of these forms are wild. We have the family Dorsalia and specifically the genus Siliquaria. Wyatt calls it the snake Siliquaria.
This represents the logic of the irregular spiral. The Siliquaria tube isn't neat. It tapers, it undulates, it spirals really loosely. It's almost like a line drawn by a shaking hand.
Right, and it has a slit running through nearly all its length.
It's an imperfect shielding. It suggests a creature that is reacting frantically to its environment, just twisting and turning without a master plan.
Compare that to the family Maldania, the dentalium, the elephant's tooth.
Now we have geometry. The dentalium is a perfect cone. It's slightly curved, tapering, open at both ends. It's clean. It's the logic of the tusk. Nature has figured out how to make a structural support that is highly hydrodynamic. If the Siliquaria is a frantic scribble, the dentalium is a drafted line.
But then we get to the serpula, the worm shell. Wyatt notes the name comes from serpo, which means to creep.
The serpula represents the creeper logic. These tubes are solid, they're calcareous, but they are completely irregularly twisted. They twine around each other in these massive clumps. They adhere to stones, to other shells, to debris.
It's a chaotic twisting.
But it adheres to a strict biological imperative. Encase the body. But do it in a way that perfectly conforms to whatever environment you land in. It's reactive architecture. It's the shell that says, I will fit wherever I can possibly hold on.
Speaking of reactive architecture, we have to talk about the Majilis. This is in the Serpulacea family. This creature absolutely blew my mind. I had to read this section 3 times just to make sure I was understanding it right.
The Majilis is a profound philosophical problem disguised as a mollusk. It is easily the heavyweight champion of class 1.
Okay, let me try to describe it based on the text. Wyatt says it starts its life as a spiral. It has a helix-formed spire, just like a normal garden snail. That's its childhood. But then it just abandons the spiral.
Exactly. The Majilis lives inside coral. And as the coral grows around it, the Majilis has to keep moving forward to reach the open water, or it will be completely buried and suffocate. So it stops growing in a spiral. It starts growing in a straight line, just a long tube. It realizes that the spiral, the form of its youth, is too slow and inefficient. It cannot keep up with the world growing around it.
But here's the kicker. As it moves forward into the new straight tube, it fills the old spiral, the house of its youth, with solid, calcareous matter. It turns its own past into solid rock.
It creates a monument to who it used to be, completely seals it off, and moves into the linear future. It's a perfect example of what I'd call the logic of abandonment.
The logic of abandonment.
Yes. To survive, you cannot carry your past as a hollow, livable space. You must solidify it and leave it behind. If the Majilis kept the spiral hollow, the pressure of the growing coral would either crush it or trap it. It streamlines itself to survive the pressure of its environment. It's a brutal, necessary efficiency.
That is heavy. And we're only in class 1. It feels like a metaphor for a midlife crisis. You realize the path you were on, the spiral, isn't working, so you just go straight and literally block off the memories.
Precisely. It's the architectural equivalent of never looking back.
Okay, moving up the ladder. Class 2. The Surrepeats. The barnacles.
The logic of attachment.
This is a different survival strategy entirely. The Analids build tubes to hide in. The Surrepeats build fortresses, but they permanently fix themselves to something else. They completely defy the free will of movement.
They trade mobility for stability. A barnacle makes a choice exactly once in its life where to stick, and then never makes a choice again. Look at the Balanus, the acorn shell. Wyatt describes it as having a coronary part formed of valves and an operculum that forms a pyramid.
It's a little fortress.
It is. It's a conical fortification. Once a Balanus picks a spot, a rock, a pier, a ship's hull, it is committed. It builds a wall of 6 distinct valves around itself. It is the logic of the siege. You hunker down, you build high walls, and you filter the world as it rushes past you. You let the ocean bring the food to you.
But not all of them stick to static rocks. We have the Tubicinella, the whale dweller.
This is the logic of the parasite, or perhaps the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Wyatt notes that these are found buried deeply in the fat of whales.
Buried so deeply that only the operculum and the upper part of the tube are visible. That is a horrifying image.
Imagine the existence of the Tubicinella. Your entire universe is the flank of a living leviathan. You dig a pit into living blubber, you sink your testaceous tube into it, and you ride through the oceans.
It's a paradox of motion.
Exactly. You are technically static, yet you travel thousands of miles. You are moving faster than any other mollusk, but you yourself never move a single muscle. You leverage the energy of a vastly superior being.
Then there's the Antiphora, the duck barnacle. Wyatt mentions the goose-bearing mythos, though he treats it as strict taxonomy.
Right. The name Antiphora literally translates to duck-bearing. The old medieval belief was that these barnacles, which hang from floating wood by a long, fleshy peduncle, were actually the fruit of a tree that dropped into the water and hatched into barnacle geese.
That's how they explained where geese came from in the winter.
Exactly. Wyatt, being a rational man of 1838 science, doesn't entertain the myth as fact, but he keeps the nomenclature.
The physical structure is fascinating, too. It has 5 valves, but it's held up by this long, red, fleshy stem.
The peduncle. It's a break from the pure, rigid rock attachment of the Balanus. It allows flexibility. It dangles. It's the logic of the tether. You are securely attached, but you have a radius of sway. You can yield to the current rather than just stubbornly resisting it.
Let's move to class 3, the Concephera, the bivalves.
Now we enter the binary system, the logic of the hinge.
This is a huge class, 20 families, but the defining feature is the articulation. 2 valves locking together. This feels like the Industrial Revolution of the shell world. The tube is just a pipe, the barnacle is a bucket, but the bivalve is a machine.
It is a massive mechanical leap. It has a hinge, it has teeth that lock perfectly together, it has ligaments that act as biological springs to pop the shell open, and powerful adductor muscles to pull it shut tight. It's a complete engine of articulation.
And within this class, we have some incredible specialists. Let's talk about the borers, the teredo, the shipworm.
The scourge of the British Navy, the enemy of the state.
Wyatt calls it out specifically. He says the teredo nivalis can penetrate the stoutest oaken planks of a ship's sides.
And notice the mechanics of how they do it. Wyatt points out they perforate the wood in the direction of the grain. They respect the internal structure of the wood they're actively destroying.
It's a geometric boring.
They don't just smash through, they insinuate themselves. They are the saboteurs of the sea.
And the sheer damage they do. Wyatt says knowledge of their habits is of great importance to provide a remedy. This isn't just biology anymore, it's national security. If your ships are being eaten by teredo, your empire loses the war.
It's the tiny conquering the massive. But then look at the pholis, the stone piercer.
The name comes from the Greek folio, which means to hide.
The pholis doesn't bore into softwood, it bores into solid rock. Limestone, sandstone, coral. And it does this without mechanical tools, really. It uses the shell itself, filing away the stone. Wyatt describes the shell as being like a rasp or a file rough, with undulated, imbricated scales.
Imagine the patience of the pholis, spending your entire life slowly grinding a hole in a rock just to have a safe place to sit.
It's the logic of the drill. You penetrate the environment to create your own void. And like the Majilis we discussed earlier, once you are often in for good. You enlarge the space within as you grow, but the entrance hole remains small. You build your own prison to stay safe. It is a hermit existence defined entirely by the negative space you create in the stone.
On the flip side of these dark, destructive borers, we have the beauties of the bivalve world. The pecten, the scallop.
A pilgrim's badge.
Yes, Wyatt mentions this great historical nugget that these shells were worn by pilgrims on their hats or coats to show they had made the journey to the holy shrine of St. James.
It's the logic of the ear. The shell is auriculated. It has those little wings at the hinge. It's beautifully symmetrical, radiated, and it's one of the few bivalves that can actually swim by rapidly clapping its valves together. It's not just a passive rock dweller. It's an active participant in the water column. It represents a higher level of agency.
And we definitely can't ignore the ostrea, the oyster.
The ultimate chaos of the exterior versus the perfection of the interior.
Wyatt says the exterior is roughly foliaceous, just layers of jagged stuff. It literally looks like a dirty rock. But inside, perfectly burly.
And this leads us to the pearl itself. Wyatt is very specific and quite blunt about what a pearl is. He calls it a disease.
Produced by a disease of the animals. That stopped me in my tracks.
It's a profound philosophical point on irritation. The pearl is not a gift. It's a biological defense mechanism. A grain of sand, a parasite, something intrudes into the soft tissue. The animal covers it in nacre mother of pearl to smooth it out, to stop the constant irritation. The most beautiful, valuable object in the cabinet is a direct result of suffering.
The logic of compensation.
Exactly. The oyster turns its pain into our luxury.
We also have the tridacna, the giant clam.
The monster logic. Wyatt notes they can weigh up to 500 pounds. Yet for all that mass, it is purely static. It's an immovable beast.
Speaking of valuable secretions, we have the pinna, the wing shell.
Field producer.
This one fascinated me. Wyatt says the pinna produces an abundant byssus of fine brown, silky texture. And the Italians, specifically the Italians, fabricate this into articles of dress.
Sea silk. They would literally make gloves and stockings from the beard of a mollusk. It's the logic of the anchor. The byssus is evolutionarily meant to tether the shell to the sand so it doesn't wash away, but human ingenuity turns it into a luxury garment.
It really shows Wyatt's intense focus on utility.
Yes. These things aren't just there to look pretty, they are there to be used by man. It validates the entire study. Look, we can make gloves from this one.
Finally, we reach the summit. Class 4, Mallesque, the univalves, the spirals.
Logic of the spire. This is, in Wyatt's system, the highest form of complexity.
Why is the spiral considered higher than the hinge of the bivalve?
Complexity of the animal mostly. These are the snails, the nautiluses. They have heads, they have eyes, they have tentacles, they're active hunters and grazers. The shell is a single, continuous, mathematically spiraling chamber. It implies an infinite progression.
We start with the garden enemy, the helix, the snail.
The terrestrial invasion. The sea has finally come onto the land. Wyatt notes they are found in all parts of the globe.
Then the purpura. This brings us back to utility again, the imperial purple.
The Tyrian dye. Wyatt explains that the brightest and richest color known by the ancients comes from a tiny drop of fluid in the purpura shell.
Imagine crushing thousands and thousands of these snails just to dye a single robe purple for a Roman emperor.
It's the transformation of a biological secretion into a symbol of human power. The logic here is extraction. The shell is merely a container for a chemical that defines royalty. It connects the lowly sea snail directly to the throne.
But the most romantic shell in this class has to be the argonauta, the paper sailor.
Ah, the argonauta. A shell so thin, so fragile, Wyatt calls it paperaceous, like paper.
And the myth which Wyatt alludes to is that this animal uses its shell as a boat and its arms as sails.
Venus's chariot. It's a beautiful, poetic image. A creature actively sailing the surface of the ocean. Wyatt classifies it carefully, noting the keel of the shell. It represents the logic of fragility. How does something so delicate survive the crushing, violent ocean?
By being light.
By floating. By refusing to fight the waves and instead riding them.
Contrast that fragile boat with the Nautilus Pompilius.
Geometric perfection. The Nautilus is a perfect logarithmic spiral. Inside, it's divided into pearly chambers by septa-partitions. And running through all of them is the siphuncle, the connecting tube.
Wyatt mentions that Orientals use these as drinking cups.
They strip away the dull outer layer to reveal the stunning pearl underneath. But architecturally, the Nautilus is the absolute masterpiece of the ocean. It grows by adding a new, larger chamber and sealing off the old one. It carries its entire history on its back, but it only lives in the present, the newest, largest chamber.
But here is the crucial difference from the Majilis we talked about earlier.
Yes, the Nautilus leaves the old chambers empty, filled with gas. This provides buoyancy. It uses its past to lift it up.
That is a brilliant distinction.
Yeah.
The Majilis fills its past with solid rock and sinks. The Nautilus keeps its past airy and floats.
Exactly. One is weighted down by history, the other is elevated by it.
And finally, the conus, the cone shells.
The deadly cone. Wyatt lists 181 species. It's a massive genus.
He talks about the admiral and the glory of the sea. These are highly prized collector's items.
They are. But the animal inside is dangerous. Some are highly venomous. It's the logic of the trap. The shell is beautiful, smooth, often marked with incredible geometric patterns, triangles, dots, bands. It looks manufactured, almost painted. But it houses a lethal predator.
It's the juxtaposition of high aesthetic order and lethal biology.
It teaches the student of the cabinet a hard lesson. Beauty is not always benign.
Throughout this manual, Wyatt introduces a very specific vocabulary, and I feel like these words are tools for seeing. If you don't know the word, you simply don't see the feature.
That is the very essence of scientific observation. Naming is seeing.
Let's look at a few of these. Umbilicus.
The navel. It's the hollow in the center of the base of a spiral shell. It marks the axis around which the entire shell turns. To see the umbilicus is to see the center of gravity. It is the void around which the structure is built.
Varices.
These are the longitudinal ridges you see on shells like the murex. Wyatt explains they mark the growth spurts. They are physical evidence of time passing. A varix is a frozen moment where the animal stopped growing outward and thickened its lip.
So it's a timeline.
It's a timeline of the animal's life, calcified. It allows you to literally count the seasons of the creature's life.
Operculum.
The lid. The door.
Yeah.
It's the distinction between the open and the closed mind or shell. It's the physical mechanism of privacy and defense.
And columella.
The central pillar, the axis. The entire logic of the spiral turns on the columella. If the columella is twisted, the shell is twisted. It is the foundational truth of the shell's architecture. It is the spine of the spiral.
So we've toured the cabinet, we've seen the worms, the barnacles, the bivalves, and the spirals. But the big question we always ask is, so what? Why does this 1838 manual matter to us today?
It matters because it captures a worldview that perfectly balances utility and aesthetics in a way we've largely lost in modern science.
Utility. Wyatt is obsessed with it. Food, pearls, dyes, road materials from oyster shells preventing damage to ships.
He justifies the science by its usefulness to man. It's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. He argues that conchology is essential for the well-being in society. If you don't know the teredo, your ships sink. If you don't know the ostria, you starve. If you don't know the pinna, you have no silk gloves. It ties the abstract study of nature to the concrete economy of the British Empire.
But there's also the aesthetic argument. He keeps talking about symmetry of form and rich coloring.
He puts shells on the exact same level as flowers. That's a big claim. He's saying that the deep ocean, which almost no one in 1838 had ever actually seen, is as cultivated and beautiful as a royal garden. It's a subtle argument for intelligent design.
And that leads us to the context. This is a static world.
This is the finished cabinet. Wyatt sees genera and species as fixed architectural distinctions. He classifies them exactly like a librarian classifies books. He doesn't see one shell turning into another over millions of years. He sees them as distinct, unchanging ideas in the mind of the creator.
But you can't understand the massive rebellion of evolutionary theory without understanding this rigid order first.
Exactly. Darwin didn't destroy chaos, he destroyed this specific kind of order. He took the finished cabinet and dumped the drawers on the floor. He said, these drawers aren't separate. Class 1 flows into Class 2. But to appreciate the disruption of evolution, you have to appreciate the beauty of the original structure. Wyatt gives us that structure.
And he corrects misconceptions. He fights the idea that shells are just beach debris for kids to pick up.
Metals of creation. Never forget that phrase. He elevates the shell from a toy to a historical document. He proves that conchology is the absolute key to geology. You can't read the book of the earth if you don't know the alphabet of shells.
This has been a journey through the 19th century mind as much as the ocean.
It's a reminder that we crave order. We see a wet, slimy, chaotic ocean, and we build a grid. We say, you are an Anelid, you are a mollusk. We impose logic on nature. And Wyatt's manual is a monument to that human impulse.
Now, before we close the cabinet, it's time for our thought experiments.
Always my favorite part.
The following segment is for entertainment and educational purposes only. These are philosophical abstractions inspired by the rigid logic of Wyatt's conchology.
Let's hear them.
Experiment number 1. Let's go back to the Majilis, the logic of abandonment.
The creature that cements its own past to move forward.
Here's the scenario for you to ponder. Imagine a human consciousness or a whole society that operates on strict Majilis logic. In order to grow, you cannot just add new memories or experiences on top of the old ones. You must literally petrify your past self.
So to become an adult, I must turn my childhood into inaccessible rock.
Completely inaccessible. The Majilis fills the spiral with calcareous matter. It becomes solid. You cannot revisit it. There is no inner child work. It's gone. It serves as a structural foundation only.
This is a terrifying efficiency. It implies that nostalgia is a fatal weakness. If you keep your past hollow and accessible, you are vulnerable. The environment of the coral will crush you. So the Majilis Society says, cement the past, do not dwell, move the tube forward.
The implication is profound. Is true progress the total calcification of history? Does the spiral of memory actually hinder the tube of survival? If we want to survive the immense pressure of the future, do we need to stop living in the spiral of the past?
It suggests that growth and memory might be mutually exclusive in extreme environments.
Right.
If you carry the weight of the open past, you can't push through the coral. You have to be a spear, not a coil. It asks us to choose between depth, the open spiral, and survival, the solid tube.
Experiment number 2. The Trochus agglutinans, the carrier shell, or as Wyatt calls it, the conchologist or mineralogist.
The shell that cements foreign bodies to itself.
The xenophoric burden. Here's the premise. The trochus cannot or chooses not to generate its own defenses solely from within. It grabs stones, coral, other shells, and cements them to its back.
It wears the debris of its world as armor.
Apply this to an epistemology, a theory of knowledge. Imagine a mind that operates on trochus logic. It cannot generate its own shell, its own original ideas. It can only survive by cementing the fragments of others' quotes, dogmas, data points, retweets to its exterior.
This sounds uncomfortably like the modern internet mind, the agglutinated self.
But here's the real question. At what point does the agglutinated armor cease to be protection and become a prison of other people's debris?
And more disturbingly, if you strip away the foreign stones, take away the quotes, the retweets, the received wisdom, is there a self underneath? Or is the trochus defined only by what it has gathered?
Is the conchologist's shell just a collection of samples, or is there a host? Wyatt says it's for camouflage or armor, but if your camouflage is perfect, you cease to exist.
If you are nothing but your references, you are the trochus. You are a mobile museum of everything except yourself. It is a powerful warning against losing the internal self to the external collection.
On that existential note, we're going to gently close the cabinet drawers.
Very gently, don't crack the specimens.
Wyatt's Manual of Conchology is a triumph of 19th century structuralism. It orders the wet, chaotic, slimy world of the deep into classes, families, and genera.
It reminds us that nature has a geometry from the spiral of the nautilus to the valve of the oyster, and it invites us to be the student of the cabinet, to look at the world and try, however imperfectly, to put it in order.
Thank you for listening to Talk Treatises.
Keep sorting.
And keep looking for the metals of creation. Goodbye.